Well, it's June the 24th, and yesterday President Biden announced his plan to deal with the spiraling violent crime in major cities. And, and it was a kind of a weak performance and a lot of incoherencies and things in it, and a lot of falsehood. And I want to kind of address some of this today because I think this is kind of sort of important issue, I believe, given the agenda and so forth. So again, if you like these videos, remember to subscribe and give me a like to help out with the algorithm, and so we can get these out there to more people. So so forth. Okay. So here's the thing. He goes out there and makes this speech and immediately focuses on the guns themselves, which of course isn't the real problem, because obviously the guns existed before the crime started to spiral out of control. I mean, I don't think most of these guns being used by these criminals are brand new guns, straight from the manufacturer, so to speak. That'd be an interesting question to check into that, but I doubt it. What we really have going on here is lax law enforcement. I mean, look at the situation in New York. As soon as they got rid of cash bail and started releasing very violent criminals back out in the street within the day they were arrested, they go out and commit additional violent crimes. And I think also with all the anti-crime undercover unit being disbanded, I think now criminals are feeling a lot more free to run around carrying a gun than they did before. Before, when they back in the days of stop and frisk, just carrying the gun was a very serious chance of getting arrested. Whereas now they pretty much would have to at least display it or use it before they get caught. So I think that really the problem is largely, maybe to a little degree, just a consequence of the COVID crisis. But beyond that, I think it's largely the Democrat policies in these states and cities that are really leading to these problems. Because just look, almost every one of them that has a spiraling problem has leadership from the Democrat Party, as Soros-funded prosecutors that refuse to prosecute people and so forth. At least people that are really the real criminals. They might very well go after somebody defending their home, but as far as the real criminals, no, they don't seem to want to do that, do they? But let's get to some other things he was saying. I think that's just completely bogus. And one of them is he throws out this idea that, well, the problem is that the federally licensed firearms dealers as the gun stores, basically, are not following the rules, and they're actually selling guns to people that didn't pass a background check. I mean, that's completely nonsense. I mean, this is where this is coming from. If they did that, it'd be very easy just to pull their license and put them out of business. Nobody's going to do this. Now, the other thing he throws out, this idea that, well, 5% of the guns used in crime, that 5% of the stores are the source of the guns that are most used in crimes or something like that. Well, yeah, there's two things I'd point out about that issue. One is that some gun stores are a lot bigger than others and have a lot more volume of dealership. And so, somebody's pawn shop that sells a few pawned guns from time to time, probably has a lot fewer incidents than some very large gun store, which has a quite high volume of gun trade, right? And so that's natural. That's logical that would be the case. The other would be the location, the ones that are relatively close to cities having all the trouble. I mean, we would doubt that some gun store in Utah would be the main source of firearms being used in the crimes in maybe St. Louis or Chicago, right? But the ones that are in Missouri and Illinois might be much more likely. But it would probably be less likely one in Joplin. That would be one, in the surrounding suburban areas there or something. And that doesn't mean that there's anything being done improperly in those stores. They're probably following the background check policies like anybody else would. Is there any evidence they're not? And if they're not, why haven't they been enforced before now? We just weren't enforcing them throughout the whole history of this. I just don't believe that's the case. Given my own experience with this subject, these people tend to be very meticulous about following the paperwork and checks and so forth. So I think that he's really misleading us. Then he throws out this crazy thing about this whole assault weapon thing. These are not the weapons that are primarily being used in these street crimes. They're primarily just ordinary pistols. The kind of thing that they keep saying that that's okay for law-abiding citizens to have. Well, that's what the criminals are using. They're not using, quote, assault weapons. I mean, how many rifles are really being used in any of these attacks? Not to say it never happens, but it's very minimal. And then he goes into this whole pistol brace thing, which is a whole other issue, which really has to do with these short versions of ARs without a regular stock, and they've been sold and so forth. I don't want to get too deep into that, but the point is the ATF had historically approved these kind of things throughout the whole Obama years, for example. And now all of a sudden they're making a big deal because somebody has a brace or something. But again, that's not what you see being used on the street. So you could completely eliminate all those overnight, and it wouldn't have a noticeable effect on the street crime. These are deflective issues, and not really, and part of his own agenda, which is as opposed to what is really necessary to bring crime under control. Now, and I think the things that would do some good are the things they really don't seem to want to do. And I'll give a couple of examples of what could be done without any, well, one thing could be done, obviously, would be to vote to get these Democrats out of power and get some sane people running these cities. But getting back to the practical matters the federal government could address would be, one, is the fact that there's a fair number of juveniles running around with handguns in these cities. People under 21. No one under 21 is allowed to own a handgun. Okay? And those between 18 through 20, if they're caught with them, can be tried as adults automatically without any special rulings. And if they're engaged in violent crimes below that age, they could be tried as adults. And let's face it, there's serious legal penalties, years in federal prison available to anybody that's actually effectively prosecuted breaking these laws. By doing this, you could take these gang people off the streets and deter their use of firearms. I mean, if they started seeing their fellow gang members one by one being arrested and going off to a federal prison in some other state or something, I don't think they'd be too keen on doing it as freely and openly as we've been seeing in some of the videos from security family footage of these shootings in Chicago and so forth. And the second thing would be some serious, meticulous tracing of the origins of these guns, and exactly getting into the infrastructure of how they really are being so plentifully sold to people there. Because I'm sure it's not legal licensed firearms dealers that are just breaking the rules. I can't say that it isn't possible that somebody did something like this, but I don't think it would count for the number of firearms that are being witnessed on those streets in the hands of criminals. One thing you have to realize about this, I mean, I would point out it is conceivable that if, for instance, a trade-in gun was brought into the supposedly illegitimate gun store, and if they didn't enter it into their inventory formally, and if they cooked the books so the person that was trading it in for another gun, usually they'd take an older gun and then trade it in and buy something new, and they'd pay the difference. Well, if they didn't enter it in the inventory formally and they simply listed it as a sale for the full amount, even though they only charged the guy something less, I would think checking the accounting records there with an audit would be fairly easy to detect those kind of deals, and if the thing was being sold, as they said, out the back door to somebody illegally. I doubt this goes on very much because the legal risk of prison and loss of business license and prison that would be entailed in doing this would seemingly deter most gun stores from even thinking about this. I doubt this is even a serious problem or very prevalent. My own guess is that there are a lot of people who, well, not a lot of people, but there are groups of people who are in the business of acquiring and selling guns illegally. And I think that is a very interesting question of how that's being done and what the sources of supply are and how it's being handled. That is something that would be useful for the ATF to focus on rather than focusing so much on the law-abiding citizen and whether or not they have a pistol brace or not. I mean, if we can't prosecute every potential issue, why don't we focus on the ones that are really causing problems, not the ones that aren't causing problems? So I think so. The actual answer to how this is being done is there some loophole in the background check system itself, fake identities in some way, or I'm not sure what the answer is to that. But I do think that's what ought to be investigated, and then we should work on plugging that, not bothering every law-abiding citizen, like it seems to be the obsession of Democrats. Well, anyway, I'll kind of wrap this up for now, and I will also point out that you can follow me on social media. I put the links below in the video of my different social media accounts, Twitter, Gab, and Parler, so you can follow whatever I'm posting there as well. Okay, I'll close this for now.